Hey guys, so this video is going to be all about, especially dedicated to those that are suffering from test taking anxiety to talk about what to do. And I'll start by sharing my own experience. I was in nursing school not that long ago. I've only been a nurse for like maybe 8 years. I lose track of time. Say eight, I think maybe eight. Yeah, somewhere around there, 8 or 9 years. Um, and so I remember the feelings of taking nursing exams. I remember the anxiety. I remember going into SVT on a few occasions and the ups and downs. And so test anxiety is really real. And I'm making this PowerPoint especially dedicated to those that have that severe anxiety. But I think just about everyone in nursing school can relate to this. Excuse me. All right. So first things first, you are not alone. Getting across that point that, anxiety has a way of, it's like out of an evil corroding thread where it has this way of not only just making you feel horrible, but making you feel like you're the only one experiencing that. And it seems like those that are very anxious always have a friend who seems so put together. And, I know for me, when I would be having anxiety, that like it seemed like everyone around me was doing fine, like they had it together, they were all right. Or even if they had anxiety, it wasn't anything like my anxiety. So that just worsened my anxiety and made it seem like it was so much more present. So keep in mind, there are very few students that do not have some level of test anxiety. So you're not alone. Most people experience some level of anxiety. So something to consider is maybe getting a new perspective on your anxiety. So anxiety is not always a bad thing. There are healthy levels of anxiety. It can be helpful. It helps maybe to drive, to push forward, to get through tough times. Like I think a lot of people are feeling that if they're juggling maybe multiple classes and stuff, or if they're maybe there, it seems like, since COVID's been around, that everyone kind of has a lot of life stuff going on. So a lot of times, the anxiety can actually be kind of a driving force to help move you forward. So sometimes, like, the worst thing that you can do is resist your anxiety. Like, if pretty much I found in life, if there's anything that's happening in my life, anything that's going on, anything about me that I want to change, the more I sit there and say, I don't want it to change. This has to be different. I don't like this. The more that I fight it, the worse that it gets. Um, so, in other words, what I'm saying is that, part of, kind of growing with anxiety is instead of making the goal like I need to get rid of my anxiety, is how can it be manageable or how can I actually use it as a tool to help me versus a enemy that's working against me. So, it's real, you can find a lot of self-help and other stuff that's going to tell you how to completely battle, get rid of anxiety. But this PowerPoint and this, presentation is more about how to live with anxiety and how to use it as a tool versus using it as, something to break yourself down. So, how can you make it more manageable? So, how can we get it at a level where it's actually helping? So one great way is to practice being anxious. I know that's going to sound strange because it's like, what? But if your most of your anxiety is coming just around tests, like when you're in class, you're a little bit anxious, but you're okay. And there's just that extreme anxiety around tests. You need to practice testing or practice being anxious. So what I recommend students do is that at some point, usually the week before the test, is to practice testing. So your tests are usually about 65 questions long. Create an overwhelming test taking environment. So, like build a test, you can do your EAQs, you can do, you can, if you have other like resources that you use questions for, but get around 65 questions, and then sit down and do back to back in exam mode. Now, that's not just it. It's not about just taking a test because you need to practice the endurance of testing, but do this with a overwhelming test taking environment. So have a cold room, maybe fan blowing on you, noises, interruptions, scary music in the background, whatever is going to intensify your anxiety. In other words, try to trigger your anxiety, to practice that and to practice things that you can, practice being with your anxiety and not trying to get rid of it. The first step for me, when I have any overwhelming emotions is to sit there and to recognize or identify with it. And so instead of trying, so kind of imagine like this. So like imagine instead of like sitting there and being like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. Imagine you're sitting watching your anxiety. So kind of imagine like it's a river and it's like a leaf floating down the river and you're just watching it and being like, wow, there's a lot of anxiety over there. So I actually practice kind of this where like with my anxiety, I have to take some breaths and just sit there and be like, wow, I'm really anxious. Like, wow, that's my heart's beating really fast. So I'm just observing myself rather than judging or like being like, oh my God, I'm anxious. Oh my God, I'm anxious. I'm just saying, okay, look at that. Like I'm observing my life versus attaching myself to that anxious feeling. And so practicing being with it because and I'm not, please don't go out and do crazy things to make yourself anxious, but especially if you have a lot of anxiety around test taking, just sitting and practicing being in that anxiety, and not trying to get rid of it, just trying to be with it, just trying to be there. Some deep breathing might help, kind of starting, and I'm going to talk about some other strategies on these next slides, but kind of getting to a happier place or building like with your anxiety. It's like, hey, there's this anxiety here, but I also have this happy place that's right nearby. And like I brought up before, the more you want it gone, the worse it gets. As that anxiety comes on, just sitting there, observing it and taking some deep breaths, and recognizing that it's going to come. So what helps me then, because I have this like uncontrolled emotional anxiety, and I'll bring this up too, because I'm sure, for those of you that have had me as a professor that know me, you may say like, oh, well, you don't understand this at all. Maybe you were anxious as a nursing student, but you're not anxious now. But there's something called high functioning anxiety. And if you've seen my YouTube channel and all the resources I have, obviously I've got some anxiety in my life. So some of the most productive or successful people in this world are highly anxious people. But again, it's all about using that anxiety to help versus to beat themselves down. So keep in mind, like when I'm sharing this, I'm not just sharing random stuff that I found off a website. I'm sharing my own personal experience with anxiety and my own personal experience with how I don't ever say that I've overcome something, but how I've learned to live with anxiety, and help to use it. So one of the things I do is remembering my why. And so like there was that, the thing that I usually bring to all of my tests, and it was something that there was, when I was doing my graduate education, and I was getting working with someone over at another college. There was a maintenance maintenance or IT person that would come in all the nursing school rooms, and he would write on the chalkboard, you know this stuff, you love this stuff, you can do this stuff. And it just was so inspiring to me, and I really love that saying, because I mean, a lot of times I was studying stuff I did not feel like I knew. I was studying stuff I didn't feel like I loved, and I definitely didn't feel like I could do this. But like, like person who doesn't have any investment in my education coming in and taking that time, man, that meant so much. And even like, it's kind of that fake it till you make it, where sometimes you have to, it's like the mental game where your mind's telling you, you don't have this, but you have to like, you have to build something in your head. Here's this reality where like your life is falling apart, this anxiety is crippling. And then there's actually the truth. And the truth is you're actually going to be okay. They're like, most students make it through nursing school and they're able to be successful. And so it's just that voice in your head that's telling you you're not enough. Now, this voice is very strong. And a lot of I've seen students that from the anxiety alone just struggle to be successful. But it doesn't mean that you can't. It's just you have to build something else in your head. And what that thing you're building up is a true reality about your why. So sometimes you have to forget, you have to remember, because you do forget what your why is. Why did you decide to do this very sometimes painful journey? Like what was your motivator? What got you in the door? What's going to be on the other side for you? What are you like hoping to achieve? Imagine yourself being a nurse. So going back to what we were talking about before, you're practicing being anxious, doing that practice test, etc., putting yourself in a stressful, anxious situation. In that time when your heart's just beating so fast, your breathing is rapid, and you're really anxious and nervous, imagine yourself being a nurse. Imagine, achieving that goal and being able to do that. And, that's, you have to have that other reality on the other side, the truth is that you're not making up some fantasy. This is the true reality. You are going to graduate and become a nurse. You just have to get through these tests first. I also find creating a mantra. So mine is that I know this stuff. I love this stuff. I can do this stuff. Maybe yours is something different. But whatever it is, create something that you can say, because sometimes repetition helps with anxiety. So it's kind of like the same, like counting. So like even a mantra, like it could be something like a saying like that, but also counting helps to decrease anxiety. So counting your fingers numbers. Like if you are really anxious, just counting or saying something repetitive over and over in your head helps. Like when there's that voice in your head, you can't do this, you're going to fail, you're not going to make it. It helps to override that. So kind of that repetitive phrase or that repetitive counting or something can be very helpful. And like I put here, you're going to love being a nurse and you will get there. And you need to look yourself in the mirror right before you go into that exam, or look in your phone, whatever you want to do, and tell yourself that you are going to love being a nurse and you will get there. I know this stuff sounds crazy, but it really means a lot. And there was a patient that talked to one of my students last semester, and told them like, hey, you really need to work on your self-confidence. And they told them every morning on their mirror to look at themselves in the mirror and then write around the outline of themselves, you are the best person I know. And so a lot of it comes down to really truly believing in yourself. And for most of us, we do not believe in ourselves. So it can be a struggle, but by doing some of these little exercises on a regular basis, it can help. So we've been talking about kind of creating this reality or this peaceful place in our mind. So a good thing to do is, especially when you're in a time when you're not anxious, think of something or someone that brings you a lot of joy. Create either a space, like a place, like if you're someone who, like, I love traveling. So sometimes I would think of like some beautiful places that I've traveled to, maybe an image in your head, maybe an image of you being a nurse, an image of you walking across the stage at graduation, or a place, like maybe there's just a place that's like really peaceful to you. Like sometimes, like for me, when I get really anxious, I imagine, the time of the day where I'm going to get to lay down and just hear my son breathing and be cuddling with him. And, there's nothing quite like that. So, what do you call it? During, breaks with your studying, visit that place in your mind and try to practice being at peace in this place. So you don't need to get anxious and then practice going to this place. You can, but start first, like when you're at peace, just going to that place, visualizing that place. And I gave you some examples here: the walking across stage, imagine getting to spend more time with your family or those that you love, imagine yourself on vacation after you graduate, working as a nurse, and not having to take nursing school again, just getting to be a nurse, or a calming, peaceful place, a beach, a mountain. And, we're actually pretty blessed that our campus is right on that Trinity River. Like if you have trouble visualizing things, you're studying up on campus, just go step outside, like just look over, like, the views are beautiful from our campus. So then what do I do right before an exam? Great stuff to do would be to power pose. Imagine your success. Imagine yourself doing well. Then what the power pose is, it can be something, and it's hard for me to do with sitting, but it kind of like, think of like a very powerful stance. And if you Google power pose, you'll find a lot about this. But studies actually show that if you do a power pose before something that makes you nervous, whether it's a job interview, test, or other, that there's higher scores for those that power pose before. So you have to imagine your success. Imagine you're powerful. Think of like a superhero pose that you could do. Doing meditation or deep breathing. So most students before the exam, like they sit there and they frantically look through their notes again. This is usually not helpful and it drives you crazy. Find a quiet space, go outside, go for a walk a little bit around the campus, walk down by the river, find your happy place, and then find your peaceful place in your head. If it's not outside, that's okay too, but try to clear your mind. Most people try to stuff stuff into their minds, but it's actually going to help to get rid of some of that. Sometimes it's even better to be alone, because sometimes if you're around your friends, their anxiety can rub off on you. So, and there's some people that say, hey, I was in a peaceful place and then I got to the room and then everyone was anxious around me, but that's where your peaceful place will come in handy. Do not ask other students how things went. If you ask other students who maybe already tested, hey, how'd it go? And they're either going to tell you, hey, it was a lot easier than I thought it was. And then you kind of fool yourself into thinking, hey, I don't need to study that much. Or, the worst part is when they say it was horrible, I failed and everyone in my class failed. And, then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. Like that just worsens your anxiety. There are calming aromas that can help. Rosemary, lavender, lemongrass, and peppermint are all good. So you can get like lotions, or if you're one of those, diffuser people that has the, like, whatever they're called, essential oils and stuff like that, you can use those. Like I said, don't study right up into the exam, and do some light exercise. Those studies actually show if you do some light exercise, get up and walk around a little bit, it helps to get your brain flowing better, and make sure that you get sleep the night before. So that is the end of the presentation. I know I wish that I had a more simple thing. And yes, there are medications and therapy and stuff for this too. So do not take this as medical advice. But these are some things that helped someone else like you that suffers from anxiety to start to find a new way to process it. So I hope that this video was helpful to kind of start imagining a new possibilities with your anxiety and maybe having anxiety as your good old friend versus that enemy or that thing you're trying to escape from. And yeah, if you have any other questions or need anything, feel free to comment. I'll see you later. Bye.